All warriors understand the need to face and defeat the enemy. Both aspects of the task can be challenging. Both can require thought, insight, and planning. But a warrior may forget that even the task of identifying the enemy can be difficult. And the cost of that failure can lead to catastrophe. Our myths of the Republic speak of two groups of beings with such powers. The Jedi and the Sith. But the Sith are reputed to be clever and capable warriors.
The Emperor's wrath is coming.
Who is the Emperor's wrath? A Sith Lord?
Ghost. Wrath incarnate. Even the Dark Council fears him. I will be punished for my crimes. How do you wish to die? In combat? Or on your knees?
I must admit, the mysteries of the Force are an enigma to me. But for all those abilities, all the power, the Jedi lacked the vision for how to wield it.
Feel an Emperor's wrath!
I am a warrior. A warrior may retreat, he does not flee. He may lie in ambush, he does not hide. He may experience victory or defeat. He does not cease to serve.
From across the black seas of infinity and beyond the mists of time, Yog-Sothoth watches and waits. For he is the guardian of the gateway between worlds, and he alone holds the key to unlock the gate. For when the ancient rites have been spoken, and the lords of darkness have been awakened and summoned forth, then shall the gateway between the stars open once more. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth.
This is a strange world we live in today, and I do not know how it has become this way. There are years of my life that I cannot clearly remember. During that time those who knew me had thought I was dead. Now the world has changed so much. more than just the way the world is, but events in history that I knew to be different and not the way I remember them either, more than what I've mentioned here. It's not random scenarios that have changed like a Mandela effect. I remember coming from and learning those events as a child and playing simulated scenarios in video games that coordinated with what I remembered. But then that gap of 5 years passed and slowly I have begun to realize how much has changed to the point where I have to question whether or not I seriously have fallen into an alternate universe, and that whether the waking visions I had on this topic many years ago was really a vision at all. Those who have followed my saga know that though some of my perspectives are of an outside the normal atmosphere, you all also know that I'm not a fool and possess a higher standard of intelligence, and that I am in no way crazy, merely speaking about perspectives that many in today's world are too much of either a coward to admit to because they fear judgment of the social majority, or that they themselves just cannot grasp what occurred. This platform on social media is the perfect outlet for these things. It allows an individual the opportunity to speak on supernatural encounters one may have experienced without the harsh judgment of the social masses and the repercussions it may have on their personal lives. Such as this scenario: when I was young, another encounter with a demon I had was when I encountered the demon known as Beelzebub. I was inside this fort I had built in my backyard with a friend. Suddenly a clown appeared looking like the Joker from the animated Batman cartoon, but as he passed through the wall it made a sound that my friend could hear, and he shot up suddenly and asked what that sound was. It sounded like a piece of paper being shredded. I asked him if he heard that too, as the Joker floated beneath our legs, and just chuckled. Then the knot in the wood in front of us opened up into an eyeball and blinked at us. Both me and my friend saw it, and he leapt up out of the fort and suddenly left, saying that was just too weird for him. When the eye opened, I had heard a distinct voice say the name Beelzebub. Another incident was around the same time frame when I saw the demon Nastroth. He was as tall as a building and looked similar to that of Mel Bogia from the movie Spawn. He had flaming hair that was long and seemed to be a record keeper of the descendants of his bloodline, as he had looked down at me and said I was the 239th descendant of his lineage. He was pondering whether I was worthy of the title for something happening further ahead when my girlfriend at the time had slipped and was about to fall off of a sewer pipe opening and into the small river. Instinctively I dove to catch her before she fell in, and my friends helped pull both me and her back up to safety, and for good reason, because the head of an alligator popped up right where she would have fallen in. After we got back up to the road we were walking down, I looked up and saw the faint wisps of what I could sense was his presence within the clouds, watching. Another strange supernatural incident was the day I saw a new dog, I think they call it, or a small gremlin-like creature that looks identical to those creatures from the movie The Gate. Well, I was not the first to see it, my cat was. As I was getting the clothes from the laundry, my cat was between my feet purring for attention. Then he suddenly reared up on all fours and hissed at something behind me. Out of my peripheral vision I saw a huge, 3-fingered hand reaching for me, and I spun around only to see this small, 2 maybe 3-foot creature, no clothing, no genitals either. That looked like what I described crossing the garage. He looked at me and snarled, and then jumped into the small trampoline I had that rippled when he jumped through it. My cat then jumped up on top of the laundry room shelves and didn't calm down for almost 4 days. After all these occurrences and more that occurred over the course of my childhood, I've done some research into the supernatural and have come to the conclusion that either the grounds of the house I lived in or somewhere nearby within the city was an open gateway into the demonic realm. Also, I might add that this area runs right along the technical edge of the Bermuda Triangle. Also, not too far from there is Windover Bog, where I believe, considering the documentary I showed not too long ago, lays either the Fountain of Youth, or most likely, considering the circumstances of those found within its waters, the artifact that gives the fountain its power and seals the demon from the Exorcist movies within its entombed prison. Now, for any of those interested in this topic, note that the water from this place can be collected and used on both the doorway's seal and the remains of Lamesh's mother, for the water is blessed by the preserving power of the artifact. Collect the water and seal it back within its tomb by pouring it on her remains or where she once laid, and this will pull the demon back into the labyrinth into its spectre form, which will look much like the form of Voldemort from the first Harry Potter. In this form it is still dangerous but shackled to a single object within the form and unable to jump, and take control of people or take possession of them, but nevertheless it still can personally attack any within the tomb. That is why you must make haste towards the doorway and seal the door into place by pouring the water into the fountain's water cache. Now this will not completely solve the issue, but it will minimize the power and effect this demon can cause and create by binding it to that physical location. As for the artifact of the Tear of Gaia, I would suggest leaving it wherever it is in that bog. The stories I have uncovered on this object are not good, and the artifact seems more like a cursed object that dulls the senses of reason with ideas of power and glory that never seem to follow through very well for any of the previous owners. From the many ancient cultures' legends I have gone through, including Piri Reis's maps that were outlined from a time after this great conflict that occurred, I think, between the once unified tribes of the Aztec legendary forefathers and their capital city of Aztlan, and another as of yet unclear adversary of demonic, Mogojite-type description. This war that occurred left severe supernatural scars within the regions where they occurred that are still strong in the energy that made it even to this day. Some of those regions I have found associated to this war are the regions of what is today the entire southwestern section of the United States, going all the way from the Grand Canyon to the edges of the coastline up into Colorado's Superstition Mountain and as far west as the borders of New Mexico and Texas. That whole region is littered with supernatural tales of legend. From the entrance to the Valley of Shadows to the battle between the Archangel Raphael and the son of Azazel, Azrael, who was said to have been impaled somewhere at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, to the region around the city of what is today Acadia, which was once one of the hidden mystical cities, like of those found scattered across Western Europe, that are said to be the hidden refuge of the Fae that have taken up residence there ever since the Aztlanteans abandoned them long ago. It wasn't until after all of these events had occurred that the kingdom of Piri Reis's maps came to be. For after all that, the region of what would become North America became known as the barren wastelands of the Exodus, or region of exile and banishment. No plants or vegetation seemed to grow on its soil, and the beasts in the land at the time were vicious and generally inhospitable. Even they believed the land to be cursed somehow. Which was why the entrance into the kingdom of the dead, the Valley of Shadows, was placed on the other side of it. The kingdom of the dead is actually easy to explain using scientific explanation. The legends of its constant affinity to darkness with no sun, the deadly curse air that killed any mortal man who dared to enter, and other attributes can be associated to the volcanic chain of the Pacific Rim that is now below the ocean but at that time was on the surface. The constant exposure of the continuously boiling lava that was said to never cease its flows kept a heavy dense cloud cover over much of their region, blocking out the sunlight and giving it that eternal night type tone to it. Plus the constant exposure of such magma flows to the air would cause a heavy presence of sulfuric and phosphate chemicals such as cyanide and carbon sulfate to linger within the region, poisoning the air, making it deadly to any who entered. These qualities made the entire Pacific Ocean region, from 200 miles off the coast of Japan to about 150 miles off the coast of California to the region where Siberia reaches over to join with Alaska to as far south as the Samoan Islands of South America, an area of certain death if you traveled in those boundaries, but that was when the volcanic region was above the surface of the seas. Now we have the ocean there to dilute the poisonous emissions. However, since the time of Piri Reis's maps they have banished and exiled the worst of their supernatural creatures and enemies to these lands, it seems. Which is why many cursed artifacts of ancient legends can be found to have had traces of being present here at one point or another. It seems as though the world has conveniently forgotten that though and looked down on us what we experience here, which largely has to do with that factor. For if you are one who is adept at magic as I am, try a banishing spell or an exorcism on something and you will find that it will reappear somewhere here with So for those out there that seek the supernatural and are history buffs on the ascension of the Greek demigods to the status of a full god, considering the gods' heavenly place and dominion of origin, and that I've been assigned to the status as a guardian angel, which you viewers out there have witnessed some perspective of my journey to that position, you realize what this basically means, right? That I have become a god. In the technical term, of course, the gods were my literal ancestors, like that cheesy Percy Jackson, Hercules knockoff, except my ties run within Ares' bloodline, which ties its angelic roots to Machiel through Zeus. But from there, these spirits that hound me, I sense that a trademark they all share is that they are incapable of maintaining a corporeal form, but they are not fallen angels, for it is said that a trademark of their presence is hearing the sounds of weeping in the distance. There is only the sound of that high electrical buzzing that sounds like crickets. It drowns everything else out. Okay, I take the sidetrack subject as something they don't want spoken about, so different subject. Well, we've lost contact with our Hubble Deep Space Telescope. Their Voyager probes are acting strange, as in one of them that they had shut off its visual sensors to reserve power suddenly turned back on and sent a data signal for some unknown reason. They say it is currently over 12 billion miles away and would not have been able to receive its signal if not for one particular telescope whose location and name I shall not reveal. Other weird phenomenon going on is the volcanic activity, which they do not understand why or are just choosing to remain silent about it. Let me walk you through the process and see what the situation is. Currently we are passing through a still highly radioactive debris field left from a supernova that occurred in this region some time ago. Though the force and elements scattered in the explosion have dispersed, their high levels of gamma waves are still present. We first saw these effects begin to cause anomalies on the other planets, like Saturn began having strange geomagnetic storm activity, Mars began forming storms at its polar regions, the Moon even had what seemed like faint traces of an atmosphere forming. Now what I'm saying here is just a possibility, but I've nervously been noticing a rise in our magma levels lately. All over there are patches where the lava flow is coming close to the surface, like in Death Valley, the lava flow that feeds into the supervolcano, and the volcanic chains along that fissure line is only a few miles from the surface in some points, and the string of volcanoes that are known as the 9 ancient sleeping gods by Samoan myths are waking up. Those chains are beginning to align in that symmetrical pattern. Also the supernova particles are condensing the radio waves, it seems like, and causing this sonic friction in the air around us, and I believe that is the source behind the rise in magma levels. I'll let this simmer for a minute and finish this once I understand more on the topic. A final word I wish to share is that I have discovered Satan's agenda that involves the religions of the world. Long ago, before the formation of creation, when the first rebellion in heaven took place, when Satan and his cohorts showed up demanding the Holy of Holies position of authority over creation, Satan had threatened to destroy everything he held precious and all he cared for. God had explained that this would not be tolerated and that he would never be able to take his creation from him, for they would all know him, for he would reveal himself and not hide, for that would be deceiving them. That he would go to earth in the flesh from his flesh and take the form of man on earth through his Son, and that through his Son he would establish their belief in him through religion. Satan then yelled that he would corrupt the religions from within and give to them false teachings by which he would turn his own creations against him through their anger when they discovered the truth. This was all a farce, I've discovered, as demons are beginning to come forward after realizing that they have been deceived by this deceiver of nations that many of you have also been deceived into, believing that is who I am. True, I am the devil, but not the devil you all have been led to believe and that many of you have encountered in your cultures past. The lie he deceived many with was that he had no intentions of overthrowing God's authority, but planned on infiltrating the church to use religion to gain control over and influence the early development of science through the religious influences around the world and their beliefs. This upstart and his group of controllers that manipulate him like he is a marionette are here somewhere in this region of creation. So you may experience both angels and demons alike that are searching for clues and leads, no matter how vague. If you do, then most likely this is what they are searching for clues to. Not that this information would make them nervous or anything.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never share, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence.